So we are now live on Facebook. Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
So I'm just going to give a quick rundown because this isn't even all of the stuff that she has. I'm just giving the bio for what we're talking about today because she is multifaceted and various things. So, the person to my left or right, depending on how you're saying this, I don't know, is Lydia-Carlie. Her pronouns are she, her, is a queer Black Haitian birth worker based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And her journey as a birth worker began very early. She was raised in a multi-generational Haitian household where she was immersed in the births around her and fascinated with caring for her younger siblings and cousins. She is a certified birth and postpartum doula, a Reiki Master teacher, and a certified neuromuscular massage therapist with a focus in prenatal and postpartum massage.
Yes.
Her practice, SageFemme, which we are going to get into, um, prenatal massage and doula services, supports families through their pregnancy and birth journeys. Her mission with SageFemme is to fill the gaps in prenatal care and postpartum recovery through therapeutic massage therapy services and comprehensive birth support services. She believes that the journey, not your journey, her journey, their journey to pregnancy through birth is a marathon that requires a support team. She offers the guidance, emotional support, and physical support needed during this time so that every birthing experience is safe, positive, and empowering.
Yes.
I swear I know how to read.
It's okay. It's okay.
So yes, everybody, this is my friend Lydia-Carlie Tillis. She's
Hi.
amazing. Like I said, she is multifaceted in what she does. And I just wanted to bring her on. One, we already discussed that this is going to be a multi-series thing just because we we talked for like 50 minutes and we're like, okay, we jumped around so much that this is just going to be, we're just going to do a series. This isn't going to be a one shot.
So many things.
But for this one, I really wanted to introduce just her work, her obviously, and because there are things like I didn't know, and I was telling Lydia-Carlie about this when we were talking before. I was like, I didn't know what a doula was. I saw a character be a doula on a show, and I'm just like, is that it? Is this? And then I'm like, well, and we're gonna get into like differences or similarities between like midwifery and being a doula, because I at one point I thought that was just the same thing, different word. Not apparently.
No.
So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So obviously we said your birth work journey kind of started young. So do you kind of want to go into just that and like the reasons that it came up within even your childhood and caring for like your siblings?
So living in a multi-generational household, I feel like birth is not such like a removed thing from you, because you're like, you see people in your family being pregnant, babies come home if they're not already born at home, right? And you're exposed to that. And then you're sort of like there step by step. So like when my younger cousins were born, I was like fascinated with my aunts being pregnant. And then like there's a baby and they're small and you can like help feed them and they giggle and they're cooing. And you're like, this is like, you know, the oxytocin levels are just like, oof. But also it was like, I must have been like, I don't know, maybe 10 or something when I told my uncle I wanted to be a pediatrician because I wanted to like play with babies all day. Like that's what I thought that was about, you know? And so, but then like looking back when I decided to become a birth worker, I was like, oh, this is something that's always been there. So like watching my grandmother do postpartum care for my aunts and like what that looked like in our culture, right? Like, and then like hearing stories from my mom about how my grandparents took care of her after she had me, you know, and the things that we do as Haitian people is like, you know, the first 40 days are sacred. Like no one is allowed in the house unless your immediate family, right? Like it is time for mom, new parent to bond and like, and also to protect the baby from like unknown germs or what have you and stuff like that. So, and then just to like when you look at it from like a more, I guess, broader perspective of like, if you remove culture from it, it's also about making sure that that postpartum transition from like you being, you know, a mother or a pregnant person who's like, oh my gosh, there's baby in me and now there's baby out of me. What does life look like now? You know, and those first 40 days are critical, I think, to establishing support, and like also establishing like a relationship between family members and bonding. And then also, like, I think that's when like postpartum depression can be at its highest if you don't have anyone else there with you, right? Like,
When you talk about postpartum, I only have ever heard of postpartum in relation to depression. So when we initially started talking about postpartum, I'm like, whoa, that's just like the aftermath. That has
right,
nothing to do
yeah,
with the
so you
depression.
have you have prenatal, postpartum, or antenatal, and posting, like, there's a lot of different words that kind of are like during the pregnancy, after the baby's born,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like, and that's like, as much as I love to talk about supporting people like into their pregnancy and through their birth, like I feel like postpartum is the place where like things drop off, like
Mm.
in terms of support, because when you have like your primary care, whether it's a not general practitioner, but like your OBGYN or your midwife, they're really focused on those prenatal visits. And then depending on the kind of care you're getting, you don't always have postpartum visits, right? Like, I have friends who are like, oh yeah, I gave birth and like I had one sort of checkup with my gynecologist OB, and then everything else is then focused on my kid and their pediatrician.
Yeah.
Excuse me, their pediatrician visits. And then like at those pediatrician visits, the pediatrician might ask, you know, birthing parent mom, hey, how you doing? And that's it. Like, there's no official pickup
Yeah.
in terms of like care, and unless you're like with, I think, midwives or nurse practitioners who like model that, that then like make sure that you're doing okay after you've given birth, right?
Right.
And then that's where like doulas come in too. But also doulas or birth keepers, birth workers, like those are all interchangeable words. Some Black birth workers do not like to use doula because the like original meaning of it is slave.
Oh.
And so which has to do with like the root word having to mean labor as well. So like there's a lot of like choices that people are making in terms of like
Right.
representation, in terms of like what word to pick. But I use birth worker and doula interchangeably. I use doula really because for people who are looking for it, it's recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like that's where doulas, so like doulas can help in the postpartum setting from like the minute you get home, like 3 days after the baby's born, through the first 6 months. Like there's like doulas have several different roles. They can either be day doulas who are like there to, like, you don't have close family, they'll come and cook you a couple meals. They might hold the baby so that like, you know, you can take a nap, or you and your partner can go and do something without the baby for, you know, 5 seconds.
And that was another
Or
thing. And that was another thing I personally didn't know, is like the after portion. I thought it was just like up through the birth and then you're out.
right. And so like, yeah, so there's the delineation of like labor or birth doulas and then postpartum doulas. So postpartum doulas are helping you like transition into life as a new family, whether you have one kid or three. The point is that like every time you add somebody, it's a new dynamic,
Right.
right? Every time there's a new child, there's a new dynamic. Labor and birth doulas do what we like do prenatal visits, and not in the same way that like a medical personnel would do. And I want to make it clear that like, unless a doula has medical training, what they're doing is giving you emotional guidance, and then like education as well, in terms of like your options when you're creating your birth plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so things like, where do you want to give birth? Do you want to give birth in a hospital? Are you planning a home birth? Are you planning a birth center birth? Right?
Right.
Like, that's the first thing. Then like, who do you want in the room? Like, you love your mother, you love your mother-in-law, but do you want them there when you're trying to birth a baby into the world? These are questions you need to ask yourself. And not to say that they don't love you and you don't love them, but it is a very taxing moment. And the last thing I feel like anybody who's about to give birth needs is to be worried about somebody else's emotional state right?
Right.
And then after those things have decided, like, how do you want to manage your pain during birth, right? Do you want an epidural? Do you want nitrous oxide, which is basically laughing gas to help you? Do you want none of that? Do you want
Yeah, because
if
I saw a
yeah.
review. I saw a review from one of your clients who talked about the I don't know if it was coaching, but then like there was coaching involved, there like aromatherapy and like as
Mm-hmm.
ways of like almost distraction and of
Yes.
from the pain,
Yes.
which I'm just like I believe in spirituality, I believe in aromatherapy, but like just from all of my like secondhand experience of people talking about their birth, I'm like, is that really enough?
Right.
But according
Right.
to your client, she's like, yeah.
I mean,
For her.
my particular client, she also had like a needle phobia, and
Oh,
so like she did not want
so that would just
anything in that
heighten, yeah.
perspective. Yeah. But it is distraction. I think a big part of preparing for birth is understanding your personal relationship to pain,
Mm-hmm.
right? Are you someone who has had trauma? Are you somebody who has parts of your body you don't want touched? Are you somebody who um like wants to feel it, someone who doesn't want to feel it because of specific trauma you've had, but you still want to have a certain experience? Like, those are all conversations to like those are questions I ask to then, if my client is partnered, to then say, the two of you need to have this conversation about how this is going to get navigated, and then you let me know
Have you seen
how
that
I'm going to
people
support
don't?
them.
Have you seen that people don't generally go into those specifics unless prompted, or
I think that it usually is a conversation that's already happened between partners, but it does or spouses, but it's not necessarily a conversation I have to have with them if they don't want to have that conversation with me,
right?
right? Like, I can hold space and be like, I can listen to you and I can hear you based on like like, if you want to talk about a previous birth trauma, if you want to
Right.
talk about any other trauma, like, I know how to listen with that, and sit with someone with that.
Right.
But if they also are like, you're my doula and I don't know if I'm prepared to like enter in that kind of emotional relationship, so to speak, then I also
Mhm.
can respect that too.
Right.
Yeah.
I meant just like within the partnership of like when you've
Oh,
seen it, like have you because that's I mean that's obviously a good thing to know too, just for boundaries, just for
yeah.
like their own emotional boundaries. But like, have you also seen that within like the conversations you bring up for partners to have, that they're just like, I didn't even think of thinking about this particular trauma
Yeah,
that I actually had.
exactly. It is sometimes it is like, oh, we haven't really talked about that, or it's like they were there, they know.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Okay.
and so far the people I've worked with are people who are like, they are intentional around the fact that they got pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
That's not always the case, and so
Right.
like there's a lot of conversations that may have already happened before
Okay.
I have that prompting. But even if that conversation has happened, it's good to like bring it up again to say, hey, we should consider how this is going to look once we're in the birth space, like the
Yeah.
birthing space, you know. um
Speaking about like the intentional like pregnancy and whatnot, like because I know we talked I said I was going to ask you about this because I think it's
mhm.
just a good thing for people to know, but like when is a good time to actually think about like looking for or hiring a doula?
Right. Okay.
Because like
There's a lot of opinions on this.
mm-hmm,
um I personally feel like the earlier the better. Like, if
mm-hmm,
you are like, I'm 9 weeks, 12 weeks pregnant, um, you can start to hire your doula, or you can start to, what I would say is, interviewing a doula at that
mm-hmm.
time is great. Deciding on your doula, I feel like it would be great to have that decision made by your second trimester, because the third trimester goes by so fast. And also, the last 6 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
6 to 8 weeks, is like up in the air. Babies can be born anywhere from week 37 to week 43.
Yeah.
So if you're like, I'm week 30 and I'm week 35 and I'm gonna hire your doula is gonna be like, okay, so we have some work to do, and we got to do it quickly. But I think, like,
I'm gonna be
yeah.
living with you for the next week while we go over
Right.
this.
Right. Sorry, I got real excited and then kicked setup here.
This is spirited conversations. I expect people to get
Right.
excited. That's the point.
So, yeah, I mean, I think and I've worked with people like really close to their sort of due dates, like within 5 weeks. But I've also worked with people who are like, we're getting pregnant soon. Will you be our doula when that happens? So it's
how does that work? Because like we're hoping to get pregnant, we're not entirely sure. So how would one schedule that, or would
I mean, they waited until they were pregnant to hire me, but like they kind of like put it out there like, hey, we would love you to be our doula, and this is where we are on our journey.
Okay. So even that early is okay.
Yeah. With me, I like when the contract is signed, we have a deposit, and then at 37 weeks, 36, 37 weeks, then like I get paid in full. But the point I'm making is that like when you're planning in terms of finances, sometimes I'm like, hey, like if you're like, I don't know if I have the money to afford a doula, you know, you're going to have a baby shower or something like that, then just be like, hey, instead of presents, aside from diapers and baby wipes, can you also make donations to us being able to afford what we want for our like birth team?
Again, that's something I never would have thought to do, but okay, that's
like, because baby showers are great, but then you end up with like, sometimes you end up with like clothes you didn't really need because you don't know how big the baby's going to be when they come out. And then
especially the people that have not been to the have not been to the appointments and don't know how the growth.
Right. And it's not to say that like clothes aren't welcome, but like things people will always need are diapers and baby wipes. And there's a list of other like essentials, but like if it's like a second baby, or if the family's already decided like the things they want personally, instead of like leaving it up haphazardly to someone to like sort of give them what they want from their wish list. I think that it's great to be like, here's an option of how you can support us. Like,
this is my wish list.
For our doula? Yeah.
This is my wish list. The doula.
This is it. Right here. I want this doula. Yeah.
So, within your work, within specifically your work, not just doula in general, doulaing.
Sure, doulaing. I think that's a verb. We can make that happen.
Well, we'll make it a verb, a noun, whatever we need, adjective. Within that, like for you specifically, because I know you are trained in massage therapy. Obviously, I said that at the beginning. Massage therapy as well as energy healing. So like one, is that typically not just not necessarily energy healing, but is like massage therapy or some form of like body work usual with other doulas, or is that because I know you didn't start out as a doula, you worked from like the energy work and body work, transitioning into birth work, right?
Doula. I would say that not all doulas are massage therapists, but there is a crossover. And that I also feel like there's a crossover of doulas and people who practice some sort of energy healing modality. There's a lot of hands-on training when you become a doula in terms of like counter pressure, which is these are like, so you have counter pressure, aromatherapy, toning, which is where you are sort of like making, because people get in their very primal self when they're in labor. So there's all these different methods of like helping to make pain management during the different stages of active labor. But what I feel like as a massage therapist, like the way I came at it was that when I talk about the journey through pregnancy and to birth being a marathon, it's like if you look at a marathon athlete of any kind, right? Like someone who's doing an Ironman, someone who is going to do the Tour de France, like there's training involved. There is an entire team, from a physical therapist to a chiropractor to an athletic trainer to a massage therapist, nutritionist, etc. All these people who create a care team to support this athlete through an endurance, feat. And that's exactly what pregnancy is. It is a huge feat of endurance, right? Every, week your body is changing. Every week your physical capacity is changing. And then you have to go through a physiological, like hormonal chain reaction where you and your baby are now going to be two separate people. And I don't know about you, but I would love some education and training on that. Like, I don't see how it's not a priority to educate and support around pregnancy, and yet it's not.
It's just
that's the thing.
This is what you can expect in the birth itself, but after that, we'll check on you.
Yeah,
we'll check on the baby. Well, and that now with dueling is that checking in with like the baby as well, or more like, I mean, obviously you can't really be an emotional coach to the baby, but like,
right. I mean, that doesn't stop
unless
me
they come out Stewie Griffin.
Oh God, that doesn't stop me from talking to bellies. I'll tell you that right now. When I'm working with clients, but from my perspective as being a neuromuscular massage therapist, I was like, there's this big gap in like support, because you always hear, I would say the top 3 things that you hear when someone is pregnant is their back hurts, their feet hurt, and they can't sleep at night. Right. And 3 of those are 3 things that massage, those are 3 things that massage helps with if you're not pregnant. So imagine prenatal massage being a standard part of prenatal care. Like, how does that change someone's pregnancy experience, and also change how they are feeling in their body, because labor is a very physical experience once they get to that level, right? So it's not any different than like an Ironman person who's athlete who's like training and then like needs to have a very specific sense of how they are in their body, so their body can perform to their expectations for the event.
Right. Now with that, is it necessary to find someone specifically trained in prenatal? Okay.
Yeah. So I taught massage therapy for 2 years, and our program was pretty extensive, but not all programs teach prenatal massage. So like if you have a program, like if the massage therapist went through training that did that, that's great. But there are specific certifications for prenatal and postpartum massage.
I just wanted to bring that up in case someone was just like, I'm just gonna go get a massage from like,
right. Like, and most massage like most massage studios will tell you if they offer it or not.
Okay.
And it's just a little bit different. There's a few different ways you can get. You can receive a prenatal massage either on your side, where you're like bolstered up, or there's like special pillow systems where like you can be face down and there's like space for like breast tissue in the belly. And so, but the point is like there are things to be like contraindications or like cautions that a prenatal massage therapist is going to be more aware of.
Okay.
So like things looking for like heavy swelling in the legs, and like being mindful of the fact that like because this person is pregnant, the hormone relaxin is really high, and so like any ranges of motion that you would usually do with someone who's not pregnant, you need to be mindful of, because not that you could dislocate a joint, but that their joints are going to move differently than someone who's not pregnant. And then also going back to postpartum massage, like the postpartum aspect, postpartum massage is also being mindful of like, is this person breastfeeding or chest feeding? When's the last time they fed the baby? Can they be on their stomach for the massage even though they're not pregnant anymore? Because they, did they, they might leak, or they have breast sensitivity. And so how do you position them to receive a massage in a more comfortable way if they can't be face down?
Right.
And so, and that's
again,
the thing,
something as a cis male that I just don't, something I just don't think of.
Yeah. And so it all depends, on a list of things. And, so like standard massage doesn't, I would say like a standard or standardly educated massage therapist, if that's not their wheelhouse, these are not things they're thinking about. And and that's fine, because we need massage therapists who have their niche in all different areas,
right?
Whether it's sports, lymphatic, oncology massage for cancer patients, like there are different areas for all of that. So but back to prenatal and postpartum, I think the point is to like help that person prepare like be comfortable in their body leading up to labor, and then help them sort of come back into their body after delivery.
Some a very new body.
Yes.
Some,
yes.
like my sister, however, like she just had her second baby. She within like a week, she was back to like just under the weight she was at before she got pregnant, and everyone is like, "How? How does your body?"
Right. Is your sister someone who's breastfeeding?
I don't think as much.
Okay.
But
yeah, breastfeeding burns a lot of calories, and so there's a lot of like, there's a lot of times when people are like, that person snapped back. I'm like, did they breastfeed?
I think she does what she can, but
yeah, and there's no judgment on like how much, but like even, you know, doing what you can, pumping, what have you, like those are all there. I just completed a breastfeeding peer counseling certification, and I think the one thing I learned the most is that there is I would say an illusion of what people think breastfeeding is versus like the actuality of it, and how varied it can be and still be considered a breastfeeding or chest feeding or body feeding journey, you know?
I do love your trans inclusion language.
Thank you. Gotta do it. Yeah.
But I love that we both kind of just went out at the same time. There was when you're talking about like chest body breastfeeding, I remember seeing a post of yours, and it was like the different latching kind of either I think it was techniques or whatever. And at one point I saw like there were two, and I didn't read the top where it said multiple birth, and I was just like, are you just deciding like, hey, I've got one, might as well use the other one for friends, baby? Like, what is that? Oh, right, that multi-births are a thing.
I mean, in some cultures, like my aunt is from Ghana, and in the village that she grew up in, like if a baby needed to be fed and a mom had to go like, you know, somewhere else, she could leave her baby with somebody else who's also just given birth to breastfeed their baby in the meantime. And
which is something else I took into account afterwards, and I'm like, I know it's a thing, but then I looked at it and said multiple. I was like,
and I think multiples. I am kind of looking forward. Like I have not supported someone who is like having twins.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
but you were going to educate yourself so you can.
I would love to. Yeah. It's kind of, it's a whole other experience. Cause I feel like when people who are partnered or like married have a kid and there's two of them and one baby, they're already outnumbered, right? Like, I know it's one baby, but like babies are small dictators. Okay. They are like, I need to feed now. I need to be changed now. I need to be entertained now. They don't speak the language, and yet they're making demands. So imagine
you will learn what cry is what.
Right, yeah, exactly. Imagine you now have twins who are like, yeah, I don't care that the other baby has things to say. I need you to pay attention to me. Like now.
Yeah, you just got them down, but now it's my turn.
Exactly.
So like now it's even longer that you're going to be. But even encompassing like the body feeding, I should say. I read another. Obviously I follow you and I read all your posts, and I'm just like, I like to learn. I was like, something I'm not going to experience, but like at some point I'm going to be like, hey, you should probably look at this. But I also saw one of your posts, and it was specifically about Black births, and with they are more likely to be formula in hospitals, correct?
I forgot, because we're talking about all the things. This week is Black Breastfeeding Week, so all of August is breastfeeding chest feeding month, basically.
Again,
and so yes, if it's not your world, you don't necessarily know. And so this week in August is Black Breastfeeding Chest Feeding Body Feeding Week, basically. And it is for a list of reasons. When we talk about systemic racism, I always like to say that like it's present in the three major areas that create our society, which is the law, medicine, and education,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in medicine, you know, if you go back to looking at the transatlantic slave trade and like how enslaved people were treated, especially in their bodies around birth, there's a lot of things going on there, like Black women being wet nurses to white babies. And then also when you look at segregation, you're not getting equal care in terms of like prenatal care and things like that. And so like that's where the tradition of Black midwives comes in, from enslaved people through to, I would say, the early 1900s. Like it was these group of women that we call granny midwives that were doing community care. And so like a thing I want to highlight is that midwifery care as a model for like care around your body when you're pregnant or menstruating or going through menopause is a complete system of care that is separate from going to see a gynecologist or an obstetrician. And when we look at how now, so like the history of gynecology, and I'm going to forget this doctor's name, a white male doctor who would experiment on Black enslaved women without anesthesia, and these studies are where the foundation of modern day gynecology comes from.
Yeah.
So
I've read about that, and I can't think of the doctor's name either.
I can't either, and that's fine. He doesn't need to be named.
Yeah,
I don't worry. He can be forgotten as far as I'm concerned. But then from there, so all of these then practices that are like grandfathered in, and the way that like medicine is taught, there's always been a racial gender bias on care. So now when you like look at what intersectionality really is in terms of like white male versus Black trans woman, trans person, once these in like the less male and the less white you become, the more you are treated differently, and the more you are at a disadvantage in systems that were not created to uphold you as a person or care for you as a person. And so then what happens with medicine in general is that like if we take pregnancy out of the picture, white bodies are prioritized. Like when you are shown what measles look like or chicken pox, it's always on white skin. And so then it's like, how do we know then, like when a Black patient comes into the hospital, that they are actually presenting with something, if the people who are trained were never shown to see what that looks like on their skin? So then that turns into an unconscious bias of, this person is lying and they don't have what they say they have, so I'm going to ignore them or not treat them the same. Because of this doctor who treated, or who did all of these experimentations on Black enslaved people, Black enslaved women, there's also this myth that I think it was in 2000, I think as recent as 2017, there was things posted, like written in medical books, that like Black people don't feel pain the same way.
Yes, like,
and so all of that, when you mix it together and put it into a system, and I'm not saying that every doctor is a danger to, every non-Black doctor is a danger to Black people. What I'm saying is that yes, they are, but they're not always aware of it.
Right. Because it's those I don't want to say subconscious, but like those
unconscious
subliminal
bias.
Unconscious bias.
Unconscious biases that inform the way they provide care.
Right.
So that's like when when you talk about medical racism, so then there's all these assumptions made unconsciously about Black mothers, about Black birthing people, that then changes how they are cared for during pregnancy and labor and postpartum. So things like a Black nurse delivering in her own hospital, but the staff did not recognize that she was a nurse from their hospital, and then she sees them taking blood to do a drug test, and she's like, that's not standard procedure. And they're like, how do you know that? She's like, I work here. So
Yeah.
stuff
And
like that.
unfortunately, we see so many stories like that of like, because they aren't in uniform, because they aren't presenting the way they do at work.
Yes.
They are
Then
treated differently.
They're treated differently. Things like people refusing medical attention with this, which is within their rights, and then having CPS called on them to have them separated from their babies. And then I think what we fail to realize, and even myself, I had to I was like, because I'm reading about this all the time, is things that like usually it's in postpartum care that Black women have a disparity, and that's when they're dying. It's things like they go to their postpartum visits and they say, hey, I've been feeling this, I've been feeling that, and they're told, oh no, you're fine, that's totally normal. And they're like, no, I really think something's wrong. Oh no, it's okay. So like you have people, and then it also goes back to like socioeconomic status means nothing, because Serena Williams almost died postpartum because doctors and nurses weren't paying attention to her. And there's a story, and I'm gonna forget her name.
And again, that goes back to the Black people don't feel pain in the same way.
Like, exactly. That like, oh no, you don't know what you're talking about, because obviously you
haven't lived in that body for your entire life or anything.
Right. There was a woman who was like, I believe in the Air Force and potentially a lawyer. I do not remember her name or her educational rank, but like she held like a PhD or something. Same thing. Died postpartum, like within 6 weeks of her child being born, because her complaints of like what was going on with her weren't taken seriously by her doctors. And so it doesn't, like, she was well off. She had like had all these like professional accolades. It doesn't matter, because the bias is there that like, I'm not going to believe you because of this, and this, all these things that are ingrained in our education in terms of like how we see Black people. And then two, when then you put medicine on top of that, that doesn't prioritize the Black experience in terms of relationship to pain, disease, etc. Yeah.
And is that part of where you as a doula can come in as an advocate?
Yes. Oh my gosh, for so many reasons. I mean, it's a lot of things. It is ensuring that my client knows the options they have before they get into the hospital room, if that's where they're giving birth. That's the first thing. It is creating a birth plan that they then verify with their midwife or obstetrician beforehand. So it's like over communicating to make sure that these, like, what they are wanting is clear. Because in the birth room, things move really fast. Like when the baby is coming. But it is little things like a doula saying, can my client have some time before you tell them they have to make this decision? Can you give us other options, or is this the other option? Because oftentimes people are presented with the option that medical staff want them to take.
Yeah, especially with that, like that particular medical person has a track record with this, so that's what they're going to recommend, as opposed to like other things that they may not have full their awareness.
Right. For example, I had a client who was having what they call a precipitated birth. Like baby was coming really fast, and I said, can we get the nitrous oxide? And the nurse was like, well, I don't know if it's going to help. I said, is it going to make my client more nauseous? And she's like, no. I said, okay, so can we get that so that this person can have this? Like making assumptions around what the person who is in labor is feeling, and not giving the support that's being asked of. Right. And so like that point of that is what I would call like a pivot point of, if I didn't advocate, then that birth experience could have been different.
Yeah.
Right. Like that person could have been in more pain than they needed to be. And it's about managing pain, because it's not to say that birth isn't, like, delivery isn't painful. It's about managing it to the point that the person isn't within their comfort zone of relating to that pain. But yeah, I think like going back to advocacy, it's advocating before, during, and after, right? Especially during, like, if things shift, because I always say that a birth plan is a moving target. Baby has their own plan, but we want to have the clearest picture of what that target is before we get into the room. And then making sure that, because you also think the other thing is, like, every so many hours you have a shift change. So if you have one nurse who was like on your team and was like understanding and paying attention, the next nurse isn't necessarily
now
going
you've got
to
to
be the
re-educate
same.
an
You
entirely
got
new
to
person.
start all over again. Exactly. So then,
and if you're the one in labor, you're not going to be thinking about that.
No. And also your partner is focused on you, right? Your partner is focused on, how do I support this person that I love so much who's going through such a painful and intense physical and emotional experience right now.
Right.
They are not in the mindset to like be fielding questions and making sure that everyone's on the same page. And
they're
so that's
emotional,
the
not rational.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the role of the doula, is to like hold the line, hold the space, and keep everyone informed, so that the options, so that the choices that the birthing person wants can be upheld as much as possible. So like, if someone's offered a pain management option, and then it could be my job to be like, well, that allow them to still breastfeed postpartum.
Yeah. You have all of their list of what they need to do after, or what they want to do after.
Exactly.
So you can,
yeah. And that also, and things like cord cutting, how long you want baby to have skin to skin before they're taken for any examinations, what examinations you want to consent to and what ones don't you do. If your child is born with male genitalia, do you want them to have, or I should say, if they are born male bodied, do you want them to have a circumcision or not? If they are born intersex, do you want them to have surgery to promote one set of genitalia over the other?
That's another thing. I follow quite a few intersex activists who talk about trying to end that like forced surgery.
Because honestly, I feel like it should be their choice.
Yeah.
You know,
and like the particular activists I follow end up being genderqueer to some on some spectrum.
Okay, right.
So I'm just like, just let them live their life, which also goes back to the whole like there are only two genders, XY or XX and XY. And it's like, but actually that's like basic biology. Like take an advanced course maybe.
Right.
Especially if you're gonna talk on that. Like
yeah. And so, and I will say this, like, I keep myself educated, but I also recognize that I'm not always going to be the right doula for somebody.
Right.
You know, I could, like, a Black woman could say that they want a Black doula, but do they want to work with someone who's queer? Are they Catholic?
Right.
And they're like, I don't know that I want you in my birth space. I'm not going to be offended, because birth spaces are very specific. And my overarching goal as a birth worker is that people have the support they need and are able to make the choices they want to make during their birth. I don't have to be everybody's doula. Right. But I do need to uphold that everyone has access to safe choices and equal access at that.
Yeah. I love that.
So
I'm like, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, like the conversation, like obviously you're not going to know because you weren't part of that private conversation, but like literally when I decided to do this podcast, I text her and said, this is what the premise is. I want you are literally the first person that's come to mind. And like, you're like, I want you all up in it. I want you all up in this podcast. And then when we got on the phone, we're like, all right, this is going to have to be a series because we
multi-part situation.
Because honestly, this is about like this particular one is about her work and how she can support you and like that. But she's got her spiritual journey, like queer journey, like just, and the I will say, and I think you feel the same. Correct me if I'm wrong, because like this is kind of how the conversation went. It's hard to separate those aspects of yourself, because there is such intersection within those. Like when people talk about like, well, you don't need, like for me, like I was told years ago to not be so queer, to, you know, not wear heels to my events, not, you know, have my nails painted, not be overly effeminate. And I'm
Right.
like, but if the first episode I talked about this, a show I did, well, that was a lecture, and then I had a lecture seminar type of thing. Literally me just being up there with my pedicure, my spike heels, my manicure, my queer shirt that I had, like just my exuding my queerness and spirituality. This young trans girl, she was like 13, came up to me afterwards, and just her mom knew she was talking to me, and like that's a hard thing with like younger people, because I'm like, I don't know how to like, oh, but like,
how do we have this conversation? Are your parents present?
And she told her mom why she wanted to come talk to me, and her mom was like, yeah, sure, go for it. And her mom was talking to someone else, but like she was like, you know, and she was talking about like she wanted to have a session with someone, and unfortunately I was booked through that entire thing, so I couldn't. But honestly, she didn't need a session, she just needed a conversation, and that's what then we had that, and that was great, because she's like, and when she said why she wanted that, she's like, obviously, and she kind of like looked me up and down, like, obviously I relate to you. And I'm like, I am not a trans person, like I like my identity, like my expression doesn't always align with like my identity, but that doesn't make me trans. I can't claim that. But for her to see that, she was able to be like, I'm okay, like, and recognizing like eventually I'll be, you know, out of this situation where I'm being misgendered and having to like conform to certain aspects. And I'm just like, that's why I do that. And I feel like that's because all of those intersections came together for that young girl to be like, I'm going to be fine. And I feel like with you, in the same way, you have, you know, a lot of other intersections that I don't have experience with, obviously. I'm like, I know you identify as queer, but do you identify like as a queer person or like queer woman?
It's a great question. I don't know. I mean,
and that's a perfectly okay answer, like, and that's what people don't get, is like, it's okay.
I've always chosen the word queer because bisexual people seem to like not understand that when you say it. They are like, oh, you mean you like what? And I'm like, yeah, I said bisexual. I did not stutter. This is not, I wasn't speaking another language.
I'm also not confused.
Look it up in several dictionaries and get back to me. It's you know, and then I'm in a relationship with my partner who's a woman, and uses pronouns she, they. And so people are just like, what? And and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not that difficult. But and also like the word bisexual, there's like, I feel like in my experience can be interchangeable with pansexual. I think that people take the bi in bisexual literally as in binary. But I think it is inclusive personally. I also think that when you say pansexual to people, they don't know what you're talking about. And they're like, what?
Joke about it.
Yeah. So
like, you like pans? No, that's not what I meant. You know it. Like, that's...
Or is that like a reference to Pan from Shakespeare? Like what? And I'm like, okay, no. You know, being extra. But the point is like, I say queer because I want it to be clear that I am not heterosexual, that I am not straight, that I am not conforming to any like sort of square idea of how I should be.
Societal norms.
Exactly. And when I first came out in college, and I like, you know, you're like queer coming out and you're like, everything's queer, this is great.
Because you've hid it for so long that you're just like, and that's what people don't get, is like, well, you've changed. Yes, because who you knew was not me fully. That might have been an aspect of me, or
right. Or you have the experience where you tell people and they're like, oh, well, welcome. We knew. So great that you know now too. And I had, for the longest time, I had this sticker that was like queer is a $3 bill. That was like, that I loved, and I don't even know where that sticker is now, but like that is what I identified most with that I did not fit into people's assumptions,
Yeah. Well,
right?
and I
Yeah.
asked because like I have like queer guy on like as in
Mm-hmm.
like not a title, but you know, just
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. A facet of
yeah,
yourself.
and like listed on like my Instagram,
Uh-huh.
Facebook, website, all that. But
Yeah.
like more and more, I don't again I don't it's so like just the spectrum of gender even because I'm like I still am a cis male, but
Mm-hmm.
like and I don't feel drawn to like they pronouns. Like if you call me
Right,
that I'm
right.
but see honestly, like me, I'm just like I'm more flowing towards like just a queer person rather than like a queer
Yeah, I mean,
guy, and it's
it's,
difficult. Like when my mom first like love her, when I started painting my nails, wearing heels, and like buying it's when I bought my purse. My first purse that I bought, she's
uh-huh.
like, "So are you?" And I was like,
Like what? Yeah.
I'm not trans." It's like I
It
see
makes
where you think this
people
is going, but like no.
it makes people so uncomfortable when you don't fit into the gender presentation that they want you to fit in,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
like they're like, oh, but if you're trans, and I realize, but then they want trans people to look a certain way in order for
Exactly.
that to feel comfortable to them. We don't.
If you are
We
trans
that's
femme or
like a whole
trans
other conversation we
yeah,
could be
if you are
having.
trans femme, you need to be hyper feminized. And if you're trans
Mm-hmm.
masculine, you have to be super masculinized.
Exactly.
And it's like that's not like
No,
no,
there's a
like
spectrum there. There's a gray area.
even with
Um,
cis people, there is like with the tomboy is like
right,
it's yeah.
right. Yeah.
Although, and that's a whole other thing of like what's being societally acceptable because like have you
Yeah.
we're sorry, this is all about your work and this is what happens with us. This is actually the most focused conversation we've had surprisingly.
It's true.
But
It's true.
like something that's come up is femboy the femboy trend now, and I'm like, one, you're promoting the skinny white cis man as femboy, where like that's not a trend. Our queer community have been doing that for I don't know how long. We were just beaten up for it. Like you're not you, and that's like for me, cis het men, go feel your femme fantasy. I'm all for it. But don't
Right.
act like you started it, and don't act like
No.
you didn't
No.
win that
Yeah.
on our backs.
Gosh, there's this whole thing about that. Like, and you can take that to any sort of like community of
Mm-hmm.
like,
Well, AAVE,
yes,
like
African
that's
American
being
Vernacular
yeah,
English,
talking
right?
about it being like internet culture, and it's like no, it's not.
No.
People
Or this
brought that
whole thing
onto the
about
internet, but no.
natural birth and midwives and granny
Mm-hmm.
midwives and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you need to actually recognize where that's come from
Mm-hmm.
instead of just acting like all of a sudden natural birth is this, because now natural birth is become this thing of like privilege
Yeah.
that you can afford to pay for a midwife out of pocket. You can afford to have a doula, a birth photographer. You can afford to have birth in a birth center, or you can't, like you have. And I feel for me, privilege is about having access to options,
Yeah.
right? Where like, and options and access usually is related to money.
Mm-hmm.
And um and so for like when you look at like where natural birth um scenarios were really the only choice for people who didn't have access to hospitals, when we're talking like maybe 100 years ago,
Yeah.
like having birth in a hospital was the like posh thing,
Yeah.
to now
Because like
turning it back.
people were having babies on their kitchen table on the floor, like
Right,
somewhere.
exactly. Wherever it could in a
Yeah.
field, and then going back to work right after.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the opposite part of that then is like now, um, your option is to give birth in a hospital because that's what Medi-Cal or you know Medicare is going to pay for, right? You don't have an option of your necessarily have an option of your practitioner, like who's going to be the one to attend your birth, and versus someone deliberately having the choice of who gets to be there and how it's going to happen. And I feel like doulas for people, especially for Black people who do not have the same socioeconomic access, are even more important. And you were talking about my post. There's a coalition that's been created called Frontline Doulas, where people can text to get access to a doula to help them with giving birth during COVID.
Oh.
Because the issue now is like, it's already like without COVID, it was already in some cases a fight to have your doula in the room, and for your doula to not be considered a visitor.
And you have personal experience with that from our conversation.
Yes. So I have a client I supported her birth right before the lockdown in California, for quarantine. And I called her and I said, listen, on all of my birth working boards, it's like, it's going down that like doulas are not going to be able to be in the room. So they haven't made any declarations yet, but basically, if that's the case, like maybe we should just show up and like basically ask for permission. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission, right? So we just showed up and we're like, we're here.
She's having this right now.
Right, we're doing this. And it worked, you know. I couldn't leave the hospital, so I was with my client for several days, because there was no going in and out. And in fact, we could not leave the hospital floor that she was on, because they were so concerned about people, like COVID being spread in everywhere. So, but my point is like, everyone should have access to a doula, because everyone should have a birth where they are empowered to make the decisions and choices that they want to make for themselves. And I'm not saying that they should be able to make choices that are not safe for them and their child, but that they have the option to make those decisions and they're not coerced into making decisions. And that's another role that a doula plays, is to make sure that their client is not being given options based on what is convenient for the medical staff in the room.
I'm gonna ask for that link just so I can put it on like when for when I upload it to like YouTube and Spotify
the frontline doulas. So it's a tricky situation, and I do also want to make sure I say that I am not against medical staff in a birthing room. I'm against the training that they're coming in with.
Right.
That's what I'm advocating against, is the training that tells them that, or subconscious or otherwise, that tells them that if I'm with a Black client, that they should treat them a certain way. If I am with a queer family, that I should treat them, that they should be treated a certain way.
Or not be treated. Or not be treated in some cases.
Right. You know, or if you're with a family or with someone who decided to give birth on their own, there is no spouse, there is no partner, and that there should also be no shame or judgment placed on that person either. You know, I mean, I could go on, and you know that.
Yeah, and that's why we said we're going to make this a series. But yeah, so for those watching on Facebook, I haven't checked Facebook in so long, so there might be comments.
Okay.
Hold on.
Do we want to do like,
let me see.
Do we have time for questions and stuff? I don't know.
Like, this is my day off, so okay. Nope, it looks like we're good on that.
Okay. Anything on Instagram? I don't know.
Oh, wait, no, there's something here. What is this? Oh, someone just shared. Okay, someone shared the stuff. Cool. But here, is this a comment or I can't see things. I don't know what's happening. It doesn't look like there are comments.
Okay.
But like, yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to go into the comments of things later and answer questions too.
But yeah, so for those watching on Facebook, I have Lydia's stuff, her website. We talked about SageFemme, and I put SafeFemme, so I'm gonna have to like change that spelling.
Was autocorrect.
But I have her website, her Facebook, and Instagram, so go follow her. Share it with
Yes,
people you know who would benefit from this. For
please.
those listening on Spotify, her bio along with all of her contact information is going to be there. And I want to talk, like we were supposed to talk about this, but as per usual, SageFemme, which is your business,
Yes,
like the inspiration for that, as well as like the donations you're taking to like fully, like, I don't know.
realize it.
Yeah,
Yes.
realize it. There we go.
Okay.
Foof it.
Um, I will make this sort of quick because I know we're coming to the end, as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Sage Femme in Creole, Haitian Creole, Sage Femme, and also in French, Sage Femme means midwife.
Mm-hmm.
And or that is the equivalent word to midwife. When you break the words down, sage meaning wise, and then
Mm-hmm.
femme either meaning feminine or woman. So the wise woman is who would support somebody through birth. And to my mother, who, like, when I started on this journey, she was just like I think I said something at one point. She's like, well, why don't you just be a doula? And at the time I was like, Mom, I'm gonna be a midwife. I'm gonna be an officer. Like, I was
But
like
Mama knew.
way past that. And then I came back to it and she was like, I told you. And I was like, okay, Haitian mother.
Mm.
Um, when I was going through postpartum doula and birth doula training, she also was like, yeah, in some places, like, it's men that are supported because Haiti is so rural. Parts of Haiti are so rural that, like, you would have to walk days to get to medical care.
Mm-hmm.
That it's really someone in your community who has been present for birth that is who is going to help you through it. So that's the title they're given, is sage femme or sage homme. You know, that's the person. And then they also will support you with like herbal remedies before and after, things to help you with like postpartum bodily care and stuff like that. So my personal goal is to honor my heritage and lineage that way. So in February, I'm going to start an herbalism certification course.
Love it.
I will be a childbirth education certified childbirth education educator by the end of January 2021. So I'll be able to offer childbirth education courses. And then I just finished my breastfeeding peer counselor training with Contra Costa County. So I'm really trying to create this space where I am able, like my mission says, to like fill these gaps in prenatal and postpartum care. And so my GoFundMe at, like, pre-COVID was like, I need an office space. I'm going to create a space for people, whatever. And like, now it's like, that's up in the air because of COVID, but really any donations would be helping me to create content for people so that it can be available to them virtually.
Give them that accessibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like if someone can't have a doula because of money, at least like if I create videos and I am breaking down different parts of childbirth education or doing childbirth education classes, like being able to do all of that, I need to be able to, you know, create those things and be sustaining my livelihood at the same time. So that's where those donations would be going to, is like helping me to pay for certifications and helping me to sustain creating content and then finding ways to like host this content and distribute it to people who would not necessarily have access to having a doula.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yes, we have come to an end with Lydia, but like I said, all of her stuff, all of her contact stuff is in the description. It's sfprenatalmassage.com.
Yes.
And then her Facebook and Instagram is SF Prenatal Massage.
Yes.
And you should follow her just for content. And
please do. I just topped 300 followers and I was like, oh,
yes, I'm very
happening. So
yeah.
I mean, I know that's like a small thing when there are people who have like millions and millions of followers, but I'm just like, it's great that like the little bit of things I've been doing are like,
yeah. And it's not even about that, because there are some people with millions of I know someone, this no one naming me, but I know someone
right.
over like 30K followers who isn't actually busy,
right,
and who isn't really doing much with it. Whereas
yeah,
you may have a smaller following, but you're doing something with it, and you're creating like you said, that accessibility for even if you can't
Mm-hmm.
have you for a person as a personal doula, you were
Yes.
giving that education out there.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I will say I am on my work hiatus, like in terms of taking
yes, until
clients
November, right?
until November 1st. But I'm happy to like talk to people and like set up like interviews if someone's like, I want you to be my doula, and be like, cool, I want you to be my
That's
client. Um,
and I
but
love
yeah,
that
it would be
interview aspect of it because again, you're not going to fit everyone's
no,
needs.
no,
So
exactly. So yeah, that's what it's gonna that's the deal. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
I'm so
So like,
happy.
yeah.
We're d- I know with your schooling it's going to be different. So we may end up doing like recording this rather than going live,
Right,
just
right.
whatever may fit her schedule. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
willing to work with that. So,
Yeah.
but yes, I just want to thank you. Like you said, thank you for having you on. But like honestly, thank
Yeah.
you for coming on to talk to my people and talk to your people as well, and just
Yes.
give that education. So, and I can't wait to have you back.
Yes. Thank you so much. And we'll talk offline about that.
Yes.
You can, call me in a couple of days and we can have another 50-minute conversation
Yes.
about the next show. Yeah.
She needs a break from me, so I have to call in 2 days now. But okay, so now to everybody who's been listening, but thank you for listening or watching, and I hope y'all
Yeah.
have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye. Thanks for joining
Bye.
us.